Welcome, Camp Writers Kin. And Writers Kin today is presenting a new collaborative piece of writing by the following members of the Writers Kin group. Molly Allam, Sove Berriman, Alan Braidford, Tara C., Rachel Coward, Joanne Dorothea Smith, Tina Cutter, and Frances Staniforth. And I'm now, so Writers Kin is a group of artists and makers who've come together to develop and explore the role of writing within art practice. The group has been meeting virtually for the last 6 months, and today they will be presenting the results of an ongoing collaborative project. The text has been built by each participant, writing in response to the person that has preceded them. It is both in the surrealist tradition and a version of the parlour game known as Consequences, with which some of you might be familiar. Each participant can only see the previous participant's contribution, with the whole only being revealed at the end. This activity is called Kinsequences, which is quite a nice name, I thought. The text contains enough common threads to form a narrative arc, but which travels in unanticipated directions and presents a chorus of voices, both visually and through language. So far, they have produced 2 acts. Act 1 is written from the perspective of a sculpture that wants to get made, and Act 2 is about making. They would welcome your suggestions for Act 3. And I'm now going to hand over to Rachel, who's a member of the Writers Kin group.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, fingers crossed.
Act 1, a sculpture that wants to get made.
Separated from the mountain wall by the precise application of a diamond-toothed saw blade, more years ago than I can remember, I journeyed by water and wheels to this place of waiting. Here, ever since, I have languished in a wooden crate, stifled by humidity and darkness, on a cushion of my own dust. And while my fabric does not perish or putrefy with age, the spirit aches and grows ever more weary, awaiting my maker, longing to take a form that has been designed to quicken the hearts, intrigue the minds, and fire the passions of a public I know I'm destined to meet. Selected from among the finest of the blue-veined Tuscan marbles, faultless and without fissure, I was identified at the beginning of time as clearly possessing all the qualities required to take on a substantial public role, and I did not come cheap. Over and again, in ceaseless rehearsal, I daydreamed the joys and challenges of coming to terms with a new condition. A reclining female nude, installed in a sculpture park perhaps, where young fellows gaze at my pert breasts, and eccentric elderly gentlemen occasionally pass a sticky palm over my thighs. A leaping dolphin with a water spout and koi carp encircling my base plate, maybe. The centrepiece of a fountain in a sleepy town piazza or the walled garden of an English stately home. As spell as an occasional table in a New York white cube, possibly, strewn with rose petals and surveyed daily by members of the international elite seeking new investment opportunities. I ready myself to play any part required of me, but so far, nothing.
In this inactive state, I ponder my fate. I consider what my surroundings were before I was plucked from the mountainside. I compare the light of day, the wear of the wind and sun against my skin, and now I think to the darkness that surrounds me. Stationary I have remained for so long. I do not know how much time has passed. I am trapped inside this box. Darkness prevails. I think of my maker, the untapped potential waiting to be unleashed upon me. Carving, chiseling, engraving, sanding, polishing, refining. With each chip away, my true form is closer to being realised. What is impressed upon me becomes my forever form. History is etched into my surface. Yet I am so far untouched, so far unloved, waiting for my partner to release me from the prison of stagnation. Do they ever think of me? Lust over my potential? Dream of what journey we could embark on together? Or am I forgotten? I ponder how I could get myself noticed. If only I could move, shift my weight and block their path, so they simply have to notice me. Yet here I wait. I stand, I wait, I listen. But wait. A careful tread upon floorboards, a breath cutting through the silence. A sudden interjection of light, drawing a pathway through the crate onto my surface. Dust flecks, animated with activity as they erupt from beneath me. My maker is here.
Prevaricating. Pacing about and generally avoiding the thing that quite obviously needs to be done. Why all the time wasting? Why the prevarication, avoidance and time wasting? Why the putting off for another time the work stuff that once it was started would be so easy, so obvious and easy. Too obvious and easy. Now they've got me at it, doubting myself. Yet somehow, though not yet made, I already exist. Formless, existing, waiting. A compromised thing. A doubting, formless, easy thing. A complicated, restless, difficult thing.
Oh, human, know yourself and your mortality. You prevaricate, yet you yearn for clarity. Remember, purpose is elemental, but you are lost, so lost. Your efforts continue into eternity as you search and search and search for meaning. As you, I am formless and unformed. I too exist within this flux. I am as you are. Calm your restless mind. Let your senses play. Your efforts continue into eternity and you search and search and search for meaning. But you will see that my materiality is your materiality. You will see, feel, know simplicity.
Human, I search and search and search until searching is feeling, seeing, knowing.
A tendril of me lain in your path is how I will draw you to me. Ever curious, you will follow this slimmest of threads until the whole of me has weaved its way through your body to occupy all of your mind. As my tool, you will work. You will build me from the supple edges of my hidden core to the varied surface of my beautiful presence. You will work me into a beautiful presence, but when the last of me trickles from your fingers, such a beautiful presence, I will need you no more. You will wonder where I came from. You will wonder how to find others like me. You will have to wait until one of us wants to be found.
Oh, hey, nice to see you. Yeah, you too. Thank you. Wine? Lovely, thanks. I always seem to see you at one of these things. Yes. I arrive early and loiter near the door. Best way to be seen and not have to stay for the whole thing. Better than the usual rock cut. So how are you? Not too bad, thanks. Hard at it in the studio these days. It's nice to get out. What do you think of today's offerings? Oh, it's all rather bland. Shall we? All right, but I've done this room. The garden, then. If I can prise you away from your vantage point. See and be seen. Lead the way. Milo says hi, by the way. He'll be back next week. Oh, yes. Well, say hi back when you see him. He says the food there is wonderful. They're really looking after him. Who knew? Tyrolean food. Oh, look, let's sit. Do you mind if we join you? No, not at all, please. So, yes. So this is it. What do you think of it? I'm not going to say. Oh, I think it belongs in Middelheim. Really? Why Middelheim? That's where sculptures go to die, isn't it? Oh, loose. If you mean it's alive, you're not wrong. Sorry? If you mean it's alive, it is. Yes, it captures a certain movement. I don't think you understand. Now that it's finished, I'm no longer a part of it. You're the artist? I used to be. I don't understand. I do. Now I'm its cast off. How can you stand it? I still don't understand. To tell you the truth, I can't bear it. When it was with me, when it had me, I knew what to do. I was channeling. Now there's only me left. I'm left to myself, and it's nothing to do with me, nothing at all. Imposter syndrome. Come on, let's go. Just don't tell him he's a vessel.
Act 2, the making.
I am the riddle of the thing. Let me tell you the role I play. I'm not the beginning. Oh, no. I'm not the end. Oh, no, 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 never the end. Let us make play with my role thus. What is formed and unformed? What is the thing and not the thing? What is the question and the answer? What is in the depth of minds and in the depths of the earth? What is in the essence of the surface crust? Spin, spin, how I make you spin until the dizzy words break ranks to configure clouds of vitality. Dance with me, take the mantle, human, be the clown, the jester, and process with the riddle.
This room used to be a bedroom, but apparently I'm an artist's studio now. The artist comes in here sometimes, and as far as I can tell, does a whole lot of nothing for hours at a time, then leaves looking confused. It could be quiet in here for days at a time. Sometimes the clown prances about the room, does a bit of this or that, makes a complete mess of the place, then leaves looking confused. I don't really understand any of it. I miss being a bedroom. Everything was so cozy and tidy back then.
A single photon blinks into existence a mote, somewhere, a massless energy, and is extinguished immediately as it is absorbed into her retina. The starting point of this energy was not observed, and for the photon this journey is instant and really does not exist. No time has passed for this thing that travelled and took up a brief residency here. This accident drove the beginnings of a process that would create nothing of importance. Something else observed this whole process again and again, pondering its meaning. This other thing wondered how one photon could make such an impact, and then continued observing the room, stopping only to swallow whole seas of these photons like a galactic cetacean. In this rather mundane space, in the back end of nowhere, something has begun, and suddenly the photon is a part of a something. Consciousness flashes, and then darkness. Her eyes have received unimaginable numbers of photons over a lifetime, whilst moving through time and space. Of the narrow section of the electromagnetic spectrum which is detectable, more exists than is seen, and so much of what is actually present is hidden from view. This room is a capturing device for her to make this tiny particle into her dreams. This particular photon, at this precise time, enabled a view of the Russian court. The Tsar was holding a military feast where nappy-wearing men fell drunkenly off their sleeping platforms, i.e., not everyone's dreams are useful for artistic purposes, and not every photon has a noble ending.
That familiar pattern of friction ridges on my neck tells me I'm in the grasp of Mother's hand, and she is fizzing with anticipation. It's been a while, but today we're going to get down to work. Oh yes, I definitely see it as a collaboration. Well, it's true that she initiates, but I translate. In point of fact, I tend to do a great deal of the heavy lifting for most of our projects. Yes, absolutely. It couldn't happen without me. Pardon? Sorry, did you say switch to an electric version? Mother? Oh no. Mother is hands-on, very haptic. Electric's out of the question. She would never. No, I'm certain. I'm the tool. I am the tool.
I chip and I chisel, I nudge and conduce. I transmit in both directions, and I am, after all, made from the finest workmanship myself. Not to blow my own horn, but only the best will do for Mother Orlando. Of all my series in the leather pouch, I am the tool, the most chosen, the most revered. Yes, they say there's no hierarchy amongst tools in the pouch, but oh yes, let me tell you, I am the most respected, the tool amongst tools, and my place is richly deserved, even though I do say so myself. No, 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 I'll never be replaced. I'm kept in such good nick. An artist knows their own tools, takes care of us and of me in particular. I was so expensive all those years ago, and, well, now I'm irreplaceable. Do you know, I think they should crown me. I used to have a little crown printed on my neck before use wore it away. I see you nodding. Yes, I am such a tool, such a tool. Such a tool as you would not believe. I know the highways and byways of my craft. I put the art into heart. And I think I feel a song coming on. Oh, no, I've come over rather queer all of a sudden. What did you mean when you said haptic technologies? And while we're at it, to hell with 3D printing is what I say. A great tool will never be obsolete. I am the very definition of a tool. A tool I am. And a tooled-up mother of a sculptor is hard to beat. I don't believe these new fads will last. I mean, I have so many got under my belt. No, you can keep your haptic technologies. I will prevail. I mean, it's absurd. You need a plug for a start. Or write a battery pack. It's also repugnant. A tool such as I remains above such dalliances and remains with their essential nature, the essence of being a tool of greatness in some mother's hand. I live for the frisson well, my very tooliness, the poetry of the tool that I am. I mean, I sing in their hands. I've had enough of you. Go. Depart this studio and leave us to the sacred work we here pursue. Of course, we could hardly be understood by an amateur. A small bird who has been on the windowsill for quite some time begins to sing. Come sunshine, come pine, come freshly cut grass, come blooms, come ants and fresh bolting mint. Let the sunshine into your heart-darkened life. Reflect us, dream us, bring us into being. As you hew your rock splinters into life vociferous, we are all one and this life beguiles us. Let a leaf inspire us, float rose petals on water. We are all here with you, let us not be forgotten. As the seasons wax and wane, show us our perennial, our ever-changing permanence. Let us see our own deeper selves in the rock that you hew. We are all with you. Be with us, won't you? Let your love cast a shadow, your touch smooth and rough. Let the life emerge with you and colour our days. Let our sight lay upon the invisible made visible. By your hand, by your embrace, my song brings us all into your dark studio world. Come sunshine, come moonshine, come star-studded sky. Let mother reflect us in the blink of her eye. Look outside the darkness of your 4 studio walls. Sing with us, sing, sing. Let us all in. We know what you are doing. Let us, not they, be your inspiration. My tweet is my battle cry for your soul, for your soul, for your soul.
The process is long. It fractures and flits between tool and material, thought and action, progress and doubt. It is a continuous cycle of gathering and responding. There is so much promise. The promise of gratification, completion, a sense of contentment. The search for integrity of form and a trueness to concept and material plays out in a tussle between hands, head, and heart. The aim to find a balance between all and nothing, presence and absence, pause and pursuit, until at last, progress.
And in progress is release, reward, relief, and elation. Joy erupts, stimulating all senses, excitement as new ideas ignite yet more. The maker will purr with pleasure and motivation, vindicated, validated, and verified. This is why they are here.
Wow, thank you, Rachel. And thank you, everyone in the Kin Writers group. That was fantastic. And we've got some time to ask questions now. So if anybody would like to ask a question about the presentation that we've just seen, please either raise your hand or type your question in the chat. I'll give a minute to see if anybody has a question they'd like to ask. But I'd like to ask, actually, anyone from the writers group, if you could just tell us all how your idea came about. Anyone who'd like to answer?
I'll answer that. Okay, I came up with the idea at our first meeting, and it was really, I suppose, experience has taught me that the best way for people to get to know each other is to have a kind of common goal, a shared goal. So I just suggested that old game of consequences. It's something I enjoyed as a child, and I took it into my professional life as an English teacher years ago. And yeah, and it kind of took off. There's a core of about 8 of us that have really run with the concept. And I think it has enabled the group to really establish itself. There's probably another half a dozen members that haven't been able to participate for one reason or another. Lots of people are really busy, but overall, it's been a great way to get the ball rolling. And now other activities are coming out of our established desire to combine writing with our wider art practice.
Yeah, that's really interesting, that idea of doing a group activity to make you, to bring you all together. I think that sounds really nice, especially when we're all in lockdown or when we're all struggling with everything happening on Zoom. And I think, Alan, you had your hand up. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, only in the sense of the the subject matter of the first act, because Tina came up with the idea, and I think I dropped in the idea of where do our ideas come from, in a way. And I mentioned something about Heidegger saying that artworks live in their own sense of time. And I think immediately everyone kind of liked that as a creative idea. So it was really fortuitous that with Tina's idea and that idea of how can we explore ideas in a kind of in non-academic language, I think that's what appealed to everyone. It was a really fortuitous, so that's all. That's what I'd like to say about that. We just wanted to investigate the process of creativity through creative writing rather than academic writing. So that was our motivation, I think.
Yeah, very interesting. And you asked about an Act 3 as well, and I've had the thought about that as part like a kind of a multi-voices approach. I wondered about the community. You have the sculpture, the maker, and then maybe where the sculpture actually appears, the community that views that sculpture. I thought that might be something that you could play with. Yeah. And I've got, so another question is if you could remind us or remind everybody about the process that you went through when you were making this work, because it's so interesting how you did it and how you kept everything together, even though we are in this virtual world now. That process seems like very interesting. If somebody would like to say something more about that.
Happy to talk about that a little bit, or actually no, I can pass over to Frances. Frances,
yeah, so I thought I better say something, and because I stepped in after it had begun, and so Tina was very clear. She was the sort of coordinator who received and then sent on the sort of virtual folded up pieces of paper and sent on the last person's piece of text for the next person to read, and that's all there was. So and I found it quite interesting that some of the words and phrases and sort of lyricism sort of was just gently picked up and taken into the next section.
And how did you feel when, for all of you, how did you feel when the work was revealed and you saw the whole piece, and you saw how your own thought project, your own thought patterns and your own ideas kind of threaded and wove through this whole group of people's thinking and ideas? How did that feel?
I think there was just something really nice about seeing how other people approached your kind of invitation to participate. What was really nice was seeing kind of the odd words, the odd phrases that had kind of been picked up by the person before and had been carried through. But what was really great was there were so many different types of voices and different types of writing. I feel like I write in a very kind of specific way to myself, but to kind of have the voices of others responding to what I had written was really eye-opening, because it's writing in language is something that I'm so interested in, but I feel like my vision can get a bit blinkered when I'm kind of focusing on one particular thing. And so to have other interpretations kind of floating through is it's really inspiring. It just kind of opens your eyes to other ways of presenting language or presenting pieces of writing. It doesn't just have to be written in a notebook or typed out on a A4 sheet of paper. It can form so many different forms, if that makes sense.
Do you think that it's changed your writing practice at all?
For me, it's sort of brought it alive, because I think a lot of us love scribbling in our studio books and so on, and being quite sort of guarded and humble and modest and protective of it. But this has actually brought it alive, because it's actually sort of crossed over from a conversation with other artists where we open up to each other and share ideas and thoughts, and or how all the sort of tensions and all of the conflicts of being an artist. But also it's sort of, because it's on paper, then that is in itself is intentionally set out in a certain way. So there were two sort of eye openers. One was actually reading everybody's, which Tina sent to us. But oh wow, yeah, reading it to yourself and reading it out loud. But the next little jump across a little bridge was hearing everybody reading their own pieces out. And that again was a whole different experience. And something Alan said, actually, didn't you, that it was interesting how everybody's personalities, artist personalities, came out in each section, which shows that that formula doesn't sort of mask anything, and none of us were using a formula. We were responding to each other in a more direct way.
Yeah, and there's something as well about hearing writing, because writing is often, you see it, don't you, written on a page, or we're so visual, we just see things written down, and to actually hear you all speaking out, that was a really nice way of presenting, I thought, to see the writing and to hear it spoken. And I wondered, how did you make the actual presentation? Did everybody craft their own piece of writing? Because they were presented in very different ways as well. Was that how you presented them to each other all the way through, or did that just occur for the final presentation here today?
I think there was a kind of a general consensus that we didn't want to make it too polished. That we could have gone for a more homogenized presentation or whatever, but I think we wanted to keep the awkwardness of the Zoom collaboration. At one point, we were talking about going to a sound recording and doing it all really nicely and everything edited very well. But because it's kind of a work in progress, and it's just, let's just see what happens if we do this. We wanted to keep that. I think that was the general feeling. We didn't want to polish it up too much, I think. Would everyone agree with that? I don't know.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think when we kind of set out, we thought that this activity should probably have some kind of boundaries, just so that it wasn't too sprawling. And so we did have some kind of things that we had set up in the first instance that had kind of been sent to everybody at the beginning of the activity, just to kind of speculate that, you could write as much or as little as you wanted. You could present it in any way that you wished. However, you know, you had to keep to some limitations. Otherwise, you know, you could be, the activity could kind of spiral out of control, I guess. So we all kind of decided on these kind of little limits that we had. You know, so the theme that we were writing about and the fact that we were responding to the person before us. But the visuals that you saw, that was exactly how they were delivered, as it were, and then they were just kind of put together for this final iteration. But that's not to say that this is necessarily the final way that we want it to be seen. We're kind of in the process of figuring out what we might want it to look like, sound like, appear. So we thought this was a good opportunity to kind of test that in real life, as it were, in real life.
We're now going to speak to Lizzie about your practice.
So, so this is the first time I've done this talk. So, by all means, you know, I'm more than happy for people to interrupt and ask questions as I go along. So, you know, to kind of keep it kind of quite informal, so that I'm not some kind of talking head over the top of you. So, so this is the title of my PhD, Materializing My Visual Self. So, so what I did an MA in whatever it was, 2004, and at the time I was so it's in photography, and at the time I was working as a journalist, and I thought that I was going to end up doing a documentary piece around sick children, all really kind of quite standard stuff. But once I got to university to do my MA, it wasn't that at all, and it turned out to be what was resonating with me was around my own history and my own sadness around my own childhood. And so my journalistic practice was straight out the window, and I turned myself into an artist. So the materializing my visual self, it always takes me back into the past and into my childhood pictures. And I'm just going to talk very briefly about the contexts for the research. Kate was quite encouraging of me not to do too much of this, but it's actually quite important, and some of the themes that I'm going to bring up actually do relate to this. So as I did the research project, I became to understand more and more that what I was doing was a feminist practice. But it's not feminist practice in an exclusive sense. It's feminist in terms of a way of working that allows everybody to be creative. And some of my influences are Helen Chadwick, who some of you might know, possibly less so a French photographer called Claude Cahun, who worked in the sort of 20s and 30s, and she ended up in Jersey during the Second World War, and hence the Jersey Trust hold her archive. And she was not part of the Surrealist movement, but was very much allied with them. And so, you know, the Surrealism thing comes through in her work. And then in terms of theorists and of feminists, Julia Kristeva, who has a brilliant concept which I've used a lot in my practice called the Cora, which is the crucible, that the kind of emotional crucible that the mother holds for the baby in order for the baby to move from the pre-verbal into the verbal. And also Elaine Sissus, who I'm going to mention a little bit later, her very influential essay, The Laugh of the Medusa, which is in which, and correct me if I'm wrong, she talks about the hideousness of the Medusa being part of the feminist armory to laugh in the face of being silenced and sidelined. So the creative process that women have in order to reshape their world. And on the new materialist side, somebody was talking about photons. There's a brilliant American physicist called Karen Barad, who has kind of rewritten ideas around atomic particles, and she talks about ideas around entanglement, how we are blended with everything. So some of you were talking about, I think it was Alan was talking about the artwork having a life of its own, and how the thumbprint on the art print, how the piece is very much a part of the maker and then a part of the world. So the idea of atoms being entangled with, they're not individual things, they're entangled with the world. And Karen Barrett's other idea is this thing called interaction, which is part of the energy. And then finally, the philosopher Rosie Braidotti, whose phrase for this is neo-materialism. And hold on, I've lost the note that I wanted to read to you. So she says that neo-materialism is a frame, a method, a political stand that refuses the linguistic paradigm, which I think is important, actually, weirdly, possibly not for you guys who are now starting to work with words more, but creatives are often, if you're creating something visual, you're refusing the linguistic paradigm, and it stresses the materiality of bodies immersed in the social relations of power. So those are kind of the context I'm dealing with, but so they'll come up, but hopefully I won't bang on about those too much. So three chapters of work that went into my PhD. The first chapter I called essaying, really because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying things out. I was just having a go at something in order to see what happened. And the first, so looping back to my MA and thinking about where my sense of self came from, I thought that I wanted to investigate that idea of being a baby and coming into my idea of myself. And what I noticed was that in family photographs, so the picture on the left there is actually my aunt holding me, and the picture on the right is me holding my son. This iconography of the mother seemed very strong in my background. As a child of a Catholic mother, how Mary comes into your life and encourages you to be the woman that you're meant to be. So I started off with my funny little essays, trying myself as the Madonna, and I took various images and I basically just stuck my face on them in Photoshop. These really feel pretty out of date now. They were made quite a long time ago, and at the time they were pretty revolutionary in sort of art photographic circles, but they're not at all now because everybody's kind of doing this stuff. But they served their purpose. They were about me thinking about myself as a mother. And what I actually discovered was that I was trying to find out what it is around mothers helping children become people. And actually, every time I looked at these people, I ended up being the baby, not the mother. And conceptually, everything was incredibly scrambled. I couldn't separate out my idea of myself as a mother from my idea as a baby. The whole thing was kind of collapsed onto itself. At the same time, one of my other strands that I was working with was a smartphone where I was exploring my likeness. And this was quite a useful tool at the time because I had a full-time job when I was trying to work on the project. And so it meant that I could actually kind of be in the studio in my home and start describing, who I was. And I also made a little, is that playing? Maybe I need to do that. No, sorry, back. Is that working? Yes, it is. So I made a little app. I was thinking about the work of an American I think she's a psychology researcher. She's called Alison Gopnik, and she's the sister of Adam Gopnik, the famous journalist. And I was thinking about the baby's perception to the mother, and how when you look at a face, you actually just tend to focus on one part of the face. So this was one of the iterations of practice, was my funny little app that I made. And finally, and I'd like you to kind of hold this slightly in mind. I did a lot of pictures of my eye, and at the time I didn't really know what they meant. They just, I don't know, I just had them. They were kind of in my locker, and it wasn't until later that I realised that they become important, that they would become important. And then, having worked on the mothers, I decided I wanted to know what it was like to be a man, and not only to be a man, to be a very famous artist. And so I made some works in a very similar vein to the mother essays, where I was trying on what it was like to be, you know, the famous male artist. What I learned from that was actually how hesitant and what's the word, unpowerful I am in my own skin. So when I compared my version of Caravaggio's Medusa to his original one, I was much more kind of startled and doubtful, and I learned that about myself, that somehow I am I'm not energetic in myself, in my world, and I learned that from making the comparison between the two images. And I then moved on to the second chapter of the research, which I called peering. And the peering came from the action that I found I was doing as I was searching for myself in the picture. I found that what I did was I was getting very, very close and kind of squinting my eyes and sort of somehow believing that if I looked more intently at the image, I'd get more information out of it. And so I started to experiment with this idea of peering at the art object. And the first, so slightly mapping onto the essaying, I thought I would try out another visual form in order to see what the peering meant to me. And I wasn't going to read this, but given that you chaps are writers, I thought I would read this tiny little bit from my PhD, which is why I chose the shade or the silhouette to work with. And I had wrote, and this is quite a long time ago now, it's 2015, and I said, sometimes she was there, sometimes invisible, ambivalent to the dark when she lived in the sun, her presence inscribed by the intensity of the light. At dusk, she disappeared, positive becoming negative. At night, she roamed free, indiscernible, occasionally showing an indigo profile to the moon. And I also wrote about what my sense of self was like, you know, going back to the Caravaggio image. And I said, I am a shadow, I am gone, faded, disappeared, a void, hollow, missing, empty. During nighttime, I am dark, I am grey, I am obscure, midnight shade, shadow, dim, gloomy, dull, faded, opaque. On a grey day, I am screen, a mantle, a mask, a veil, foggy, drab. On a sunny day, I am transparent, see-through, diaphanous, translucent, pale, etc. It goes on a bit. I won't carry on with that. But so the peering. I was trying to combine the idea of the peering and my kind of shadowy sense of self. And so I made what I called the Shade series. And I started to experiment with emotions that I felt were intrinsic could be intrinsic to myself. So I did rage, happy, surprise, etc., etc. And the one that resonated the most was the one called surprise. That sense of sort of startlement that I had in not only in does that show that? Well, yes. So the sense of startlement I had as a child, which I saw a lot in photographs, you know, where I was kind of, well, what on earth is going on here? And that when I made the Shade surprise, sorry, I don't know if you can see it, it's probably a bit dark. that was the one that resonated the most with me. And when I thought back to the male artists that I made of the Rembrandt etchings, again, it was the surprised one that really worked for me, whereas the other ones, the sort of slightly lewd or tired, or the other images, they just didn't feel like me. So it was surprise, absolutely. I can see it in my childhood pictures, and I could see it in the Caravaggio image, this little startled person. And then the final series that I made was again working with the peering theme. I made these pictures where I took the childhood image and I literally used a laser engraver and cut myself from the image. But what I've done is I've mounted them onto a box, and I'm not sure. Again, hopefully this will work. So that actually, when you look at the image, there is an actual hole there, and it is quite deep. You know, you peer into the box to look for the person who's completely absent, who is not there. And with all of this work, I was beginning to get to much more a sense of myself and how to show that to people who were looking at the artwork. And then the final stage is the beholding stage, where I did finally create a visual that felt like me. And this, again, a lot of these iterations had happened along the way. If you think back to the eyes, I'd been making eyes really quite early on in the process, but I kind of picked it up and worked with it much more intensively towards the end of the project, and eventually I started to if you notice that the eye creates a kind of glassy effect, and you can see what's going on in the background, and that I wanted to incorporate that. I wanted to show the eye what I was looking at, as well as my look. So the both of the things are kind of layered together. And the final pieces are the ones you can see here, and these ones, where I'm kind of at peace with myself. I'm just staring into space. My absence is happy. I'm happily peering. And I also found the work of a psychotherapist called Donald Winnicott incredibly helpful with this, because he talks about how the baby is enlivened within the look of the mother. So my visual self, the part of me that is refuting the linguistic paradigm, and that the part of me that is my visual self is my look and what I look at. There we go. That's it. Was that too dense?
No, thank you, Lizzie. That was really, really amazing. Actually, a fantastic overview of your work, and congratulations as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a fantastic thing to achieve.